Hello and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining Brian and I for this presentation today. This presentation is really geared towards all types of retirement plan committee members. Those folks that perhaps that are in an HR function, a controller or a CFO function, or deal with any type of qualified plan in their place of business. We know your jobs are super busy and demanding and challenging, and it can't be easy to navigate through the world of financial service professionals. There's a myriad of different providers on top of record keepers and TPAs that might be helping you with your plan. They might be brokers, they might be financial planners, they might be registered investment advisors, and you might even be dealing with some consultants. So in the same way that when you go to see a primary care physician, you might necessarily not want that person conducting surgery on you. That primary care physician relies on experts to help delegate and to help really specialize into a particular type of medicine that can be the most beneficial to you. So my name's Ryan Campagna, and I'm one of the partners and head of sales here at Sentinel Group, and joined with my colleague, Brian Raymond. We're excited to provide you this presentation to help you as an audience member kind of navigate that world and make the best decisions for the plan and certainly your participants. According to a survey with the Retirement Plan Advisor Council, about 75% of advisors that are out there between the plans of 5 and 500 million don't have specialist advisors that they're working with. So what does that mean? Who are they working with if they're not working with specialist advisors? Well, what that really means is they're working with folks that perhaps they don't have an advisor on their team. Perhaps they're working with somebody who doesn't take fiduciary responsibility, right? So there's a pretty large group of folks that really aren't getting that upper echelon idea of support. And Brian and I are going to walk you through some of those things today. Brian, could you actually go back 2 slides to the agenda if you don't mind? Thank you. So Brian and I are really going to cover today, how do you sort through that, and how do you discern between those folks that are specialists and really have designed their business and their profession to focus on qualified plans in the retirement world. Those types of specialists have to know Department of Labor rules, ERISA rules, and certainly investment information. It's the marriage of all that that really makes them a specialist advisor versus those folks that perhaps are just generalists. Those are just the financial planners that are typically working with individuals and families and might not necessarily focus on qualified plans, but through the nature of their networks might have 1 or 2 plans that they're working with. So we're going to try to sort through that to make sure you can tell the specialists from the generalist, and ultimately to help you pick which is going to be best for your group. So today we're going to cover the evolution of a fiduciary advisor, where that specialty kind of came from and what to expect from an advisor today. Brian's going to talk about some top value services that your advisor should be providing, and he's going to go deep in a couple different areas there, such as best practices for selecting a default fund. And then I'll finish the presentation by talking about what are some key ways that those elite advisors are helping you prepare your participants for retirement. Before we get started, those of you that don't know, Sentinel Group is an employee benefit company that focuses on health, wealth, and retirement. Our specialty is really to try to make it easy for the plan sponsors that are out there, the participants, and those professionals working in your offices dealing with the plans day in and day out. We're constantly focused on participant outcomes. We want to make sure your plans are running in a really good way, and then ultimately make sure those participants are able to retire. So we have a keen focus on that. We pride ourselves by offering a tremendous amount of expertise and experience. We've been doing this type of work since 1987, and really all the professionals that Sentinel brings to bear with our client relationships are experts in one way, shape, or form. And finally, when we do interact with our clients that are out there in the marketplace today, we want to make sure we really get to know them. We go out of our way to care, to understand the nature of their business, the culture of their business, and make sure we're providing those services in a way that really makes sense and resonates with themselves, their groups, and our overall community at large. So before we jump in, this slide kind of goes through the various evolution of a specialist advisor. Some of these dates are before my time, but I'm going to talk about them nonetheless. So the burgeoning professionalism of the retirement plan advisor specialist really got its first blossom or first seed in the 80s and 90s. These are some of the first times where investment advisors were acting as fiduciaries, sharing responsibility with the plan sponsors. Those are the days where plans were being moved from a balance forward environment and they weren't even valued on a daily basis. moved into record-keeping platforms where participants can expect daily valuation of their accounts, account statements on a quarterly basis, and really 24/7 access to information. I got into the business in the early 2000s when the fiduciary standard was really in full bloom. Some call it the days of the 3 Fs: fees, funds, and fiduciaries. Today, those things are still critically important, but they're really just the table stakes to even enter this industry. That was the evolution of some standardization in the industry, where professional organizations like FI 360 created the AIF designation, which was a minimum set of standards for financial professionals to call themselves investment advisors. It was where plan sponsors started to clarify the way that they were hiring a fiduciary, either as a 338 investment manager or as a 321 investment advisor, which are subsections of the ERISA code that allow them to share risk with a service provider. And as that evolved through the 90s into the 2000s, to eventually where we are today, we now have those elite specialists that certainly cover the 3 Fs, that certainly cover all of the stuff that I've already mentioned, but are thought leaders. They're speaking on panels. They're demonstrating their expertise to other advisors. They're constantly following industry best practices. They remain razor focused on helping investment committees, bringing very unique ideas to bear, and focused on things like employee outcomes, retirement readiness, and then even ways to better manage a record keeper to make sure plan sponsors are asking the right questions, like what are your cybersecurity measures and things like that. So we'll go a little deeper in that, but that's a little bit of the evolution. So we encourage those folks to kind of think about your service providers today and see if you have that 3.0 fiduciary to help you, as we hope you would in today's environment. So before I turn it over to Brian, I wanted to mention a little bit about a recent Fidelity study that they did that really dove into the idea of is Fidelity working with the specialists that are out there versus the generalists? And the significance of the Fidelity survey is they're the largest retirement plan provider in the country. So the sample size is a really large group of the retirement plans that are in the market today. So the way that you would look at this is 66%, according to Fidelity, of their current plans, Fidelity feels that they're working with a specialist today. So if Fidelity took a snapshot of their current business, over half, about 66%, are working with specialists, which is a good thing. People, I think, have recognized the value that those specialist advisors provide and are embracing them. The interesting thing is, since the year 2000, so very recently, of the new plans that are coming into Fidelity, over 3/4 of them, 77% of those plans, are being brought to Fidelity by a retirement plan specialist. So clearly, it's a pretty significant trend that as business owners and as CFOs and decision makers and committees make changes, they're gravitating more towards those quality specialist advisors. A couple super high level things that you might recognize in a generalist, so somebody who's not a specialist, would be their lack of desire to act as a fiduciary advisor, right? So they're not putting their interest in sharing that fiduciary advice in writing, and there's not a formal contract. So that's really one way that you might know that you're dealing with a generalist. That generalist advisor may very heavily rely upon the vendor, right? So anytime you have a broker that you're dealing with and you ask, hey, are you a fiduciary? And they say, well, I'm not, but this company that works with my record keeper is, that starts to get into a situation when you have redundant providers and you're probably not having the most efficient design possible. So something to keep in mind. Some of those brokers, again, that aren't specialists are not necessarily independent. So in those circumstances, you might run into that generalist that is representing a company that has their own products. So they might be making recommendations or suggestions to you that might affect the method and the amount they get compensated. So you really want to steer clear of any of those conflicts and try to remain independent. And then finally, the overall way that they nurture that relationship. And if you think in your mind, I don't know if I'm getting enough for this person, there's a chance that they may only have 2 or 3 qualified plans, and you've outgrown them. So I think my intro has gone long enough. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Brian to dive a little bit deeper into a couple key areas.
Thanks, Ryan. And thanks to our audience members who've joined us today to learn a little bit more about the specialist retirement plan advisor and the expertise that they can bring to you and your committee. The fact of the matter is that business models have really considerably varied from advisor to advisor based on the emphasis within their own organization. And plan sponsors are finding that by seeking out the expertise and choosing a specialist retirement plan advisor, they are affording themselves and their employees an opportunity to better reach those outcomes for retirement. What are some of the ways that those retirement plan advisors are impacting those plans? Well, specifically, and I think in one of the highest levels, and certainly if we hear from the survey response from Fidelity, the top response from smaller plans is in that plan design opportunity. We've had some major legislative changes over the past several years in Washington that has presented some opportunities and also some threats to retirement plans that exist in the market today. Being able to navigate that landscape and adjust and amend our retirement plans on the go is something that a retirement plan specialist is keenly aware and able to deliver to those retirement plan committees. Fidelity has seen that about a third of retirement plan sponsors are now actively looking to switch retirement plan advisors and are looking for some of that expertise. And that plan design effort is one of the top go-getters. As I mentioned, recent legislative updates do present opportunities for plan sponsors as well. There are opportunities for anything from tax credits to design changes that help better manage and reach for those participant outcomes that HR committees and CFOs and business owners are looking for within their retirement group. Benefits aren't cheap. We've seen the embrace of technology increase the cost in several areas, the embracing of additional services, increasing cost in the benefit packages that we offer to our employees. And plan sponsors are faced with the responsibility of understanding those costs and how they're represented as a commensurate value to the services that are being provided. A specialist retirement plan advisor is keenly aware and can provide not only the expertise, but the experience of working with others in similar industries and other plans of similar sizes to provide best practices and opportunities for sponsors to take advantage of the ways to cut those costs and maintain an adequate benefit structure. Sponsors, as we've heard about, have been focused on the funds, the fees, and the fiduciary as part of that evolution of fiduciary services that we've seen over the past decade or so. But the specialist retirement plan advisor can take that a step further for plan sponsors, making that process easy, transparent, and digestible. In many situations, running a retirement plan is not the first day job for many of these HR committees and business owners. So working with a specialist to help digest that information and help manage your plan in an effective fashion, in an easy fashion, is one of the ways that specialists are really creating waves and making a difference. And that fiduciary education is kind of part of that funds, fees, and fiduciary as well, maintaining the ability for plan sponsors to understand their responsibility and the ways that their fiduciary advisor is relieving some of that liability as well. Plan sponsors demonstrate that working with a specialist partner gives them the opportunity to protect and grow their business going forward. Those specialist retirement plan advisors provide better plan benefits and better participant outcomes, and plan sponsors can focus on their retirement on their company outcomes rather than on the retirement benefit, as they're able to administer their plans with ease. Sponsors who are able to take advantage of the experts don't have to dedicate an inordinate amount of time to running their plan, and can take comfort in knowing that the fees that are charged by their service providers and managers are reasonable compared to plans of their size, in addition to maintaining adequate compliance and staying within the guidelines of ERISA and the changing legislative structure. Focusing on outcomes is something that we'll hear a little bit more about from Ryan towards the end of this presentation, but is a clear goal of plan sponsors today. Maintaining A plan that suits their retirement demographic and fits their retirement outcome goals is key to being able to offer a benefit that fits your employees' needs. An additional way that retirement specialists are able to manage and help maintain a strategic retirement plan program is by helping plan sponsors select the most appropriate default fund for their plan. Again, target date funds, which is probably the most popular default fund, have been around since 1994, but didn't really make waves or see growth until the Pension Protection Act of 2008 mandated that a target date fund like structure or allocation structure be used in that default segment. And while target dates do maintain a pretty high allocation of those default fund selections, there are a number of different options that are available to plan sponsors. A specialist retirement plan advisor can help navigate this market, whether you're looking at that target date fund or something more along the lines of a risk-based or lifestyle fund, a balanced fund, or even managed account products that continue to provide better cost structures and more personalized investment management. With Secure Act 2.0, we've seen the inclusion of annuities in this conversation as well, which is further complicating the options that are available in this space and helping further evolve the options that plan sponsors have available to their plan. Those target date funds can really come in all shapes and sizes. And while they do dominate that landscape, there are some pretty big differences between each one of those products. Advisors play a critical role in helping plan sponsors with both the selection and the monitoring on an ongoing basis of that default fund for their segment of their plan. Target date funds come in a number of different shapes and sizes. They can be passive, active, or a blend of those two management styles. We see some target date funds that consist of proprietary investment options, either from a record keeper or from a fund company, and yet others that use a completely open architecture structure as well. Glide paths can be conservative to aggressive. They can manage to retirement or can continue to de-risk that portfolio through the retirement years of an individual. Mutual funds, collective investment trusts, and even ESG have added further complexity to the selection process and the ongoing monitoring and possible replacement if it's deemed necessary. Plan sponsors are definitely looking to their advisor for formal searches and maintaining an option that is in the best interest of their employees and fits their employee demographic.
Hey, Brian, if I could interject for a second, one of the things that I feel like we see oftentimes in the marketplace today is those folks that aren't specialists, those generalists oftentimes gravitate. They take the path of least resistance, and sometimes they'll take a mutual fund company who has a record keeper, and they often are just choosing the target date fund for that record keeper. So that tends to be a really critical part in the decision making process, where it's important to have such a structure. And I know you might talk about this in a second. It's important to have a structure about all the funds, but then with the target date fund, it's almost like they say, oh, there's no process. We're just going to pick the one because the record keeper might give them a discount. So I hope I didn't steal that thunder there, but I feel like I just wanted to add that.
No, and I think you make a fantastic point, Ryan, since target date funds do tend to capture a majority of the contributions going into retirement plan these days, and thus should require a little bit more due diligence in the selection and monitoring and making sure that that option best suits those investors that are in your retirement plan. And to your point, sponsors are looking at more than just cost. When you look at the underlying selection criteria, plan sponsors are indicating that the most important factors to them are high performance, even if that means higher cost, and good, transparent communication to their employees. I think the knowledge of understanding what a target date fund is and how that can help benefit an employee as a professional manager manages that glide path and risk from the earnings years to that decumulation year when you're in retirement is a very important feature of retirement plans and continues to gain more and more traction from plan sponsors. Again, if we look at the survey studies from Fidelity, they demonstrate that not only is it the highest performance and the transparent communication that plan sponsors are looking for, but also that low cost and specifically that fee-based approach, which you could encompass in both the internal cost of that management structure, but also for the selection being maybe something that gives you a rebate on your record keeping fees as well from a plan perspective. I find it very interesting that those survey results are at the bottom of the survey. Indicating that, again, plan sponsors are more focused on outcomes. They're more focused on that communication and more focused on providing employees with the best opportunity to reach their own personal retirement goals. With that, I'll actually kick it back over to you, Ryan, to maybe talk about some of those retirement goals and how employees are reaching them.
Sure. So I think Brian laid out some really nice points in terms of, if you hire a specialist, what are some of the first things they'll do? They'll scrutinize the fund lineup. They'll scrutinize the communication. They'll take a look at the target date fund. So once the plan is in really good shape from a fees, funds, and fiduciary standpoint, the next step is making sure those changes are communicated to the plan participants, and then helping those plan participants kind of travel that road, to retirement. So I think here's a couple things that I think of to certainly come to my mind that those specialist advisor firms are able to do from participants, where maybe some of the generalists are not, because they might not have the staff to do it, or just aren't built for this type of work. So I think the first is they have qualified professionals. This on surface level might seem like a pretty obvious statement, but I think a lot of the generalists rely very much on the record keepers to provide enrollment support. And there's nothing wrong with that. Some record keepers do some outstanding job of, most record keepers do an outstanding job of putting boots on the ground at the various offices, and have seminars and webinars that ultimately help participants enroll and stuff like that. But I just want to make the clear delineation that I think there's a very different, there's a very big difference between an enrollment rep versus a planner that can help make actual decisions about the plan. So I think enrollment reps are great. I think you'll find those specialist firms will be able to put people in those offices and have one-on-one consultations with those folks that can really get into a lot more deeper things, like helping them choose investments, helping them choose deferral rates, helping them understand how Social Security and other types of benefits and features that are out there in the marketplace might fit in with the retirement plan decision. How does the HRA that they have fit in, or the HSA, I should say, the HSA fit in with their retirement plan, right? How do I navigate those decisions? So I think having the right professionals, ideally certified financial planners, to be able to help with that process, I think are really, really critical, and are becoming more and more prevalent within those specialist advisors. People might not be able to sit down with everybody at the company. So Bri talked a lot about plan design and making sure that plan design. So we have it as an important thing for the plan sponsor, but it's also a really critical thing for the plan participant. We all know there are members of all organizations that these types of decisions overwhelm them. They tend to shut down. It might be very difficult to get those individuals to go to an enrollment meeting or just simply listen to a benefits presentation. But most of the retirement plan industry is completely engaged in helping those folks as well. So using auto features that really can help drive the unengaged participant are absolutely something that's critical for all providers. So the second step would be expertise on plan design and auto features. So finding the right auto enrollment scheme that's best for your plan. Determining if auto escalation is the best thing for you folks, where you're deferring people at 5% and then you're increasing them 1% over time. And then finally, making the investments easy. I think Brian did a nice job of talking about all of the various types of investments. There's a lot of really great investment offerings. We just need to make sure we find the one that's best for your plan for those participants that are rather unengaged. So auto enroll, auto increase, and picking the right QDIA or default fund are super important. The third step in really how specialists are able to help plan participants is meeting them where they are and really picking the right topics for the right crowd. So all organizations are a little different. They differ by generation, in sophistication, and the differences go on and on. So I think getting a good understanding of what your participants might need to focus on, whether it's entry-level employees needing to be talked to about when they should join the plan, how much to save and what to invest, versus those folks that are, again, maybe a little bit more concerned about retirement income planning and when that Social Security and Medicare costs kick in. Those elite retirement plan specialist advisors are able to talk about all of those things in those group settings, because it would be crazy to think that we could just come in and talk about your 401k or your 403b plan and really be doing the participants justice. We really have to touch upon that, but expand to include more of their total picture and take more of a holistic view. So the fourth thing that I would mention is really having the right type of technology. Those elite specialists are going to do a good job of balancing the in-person connectivity of being belly to belly with somebody for those participants that really want to speak with a human being live and in person, right? Whether it be a one-on-one presentation or a group presentation. The technology comes in where you want to introduce a financial wellness package, right, to your plan, and you might have a group of participants that would much rather answer some questions and basically go through some questions and get very distinct action steps through a financial wellness offering, right? There's a lot of participants that do that, and they might be the people that don't necessarily need to sit down with people one-on-one. So meeting people where they are from a content standpoint, and then how they're going to digest the information is something that's really, really important. The final thing I'll mention about technology is during COVID, Sentinel had rolled out something called our Schedule Once technology, which was a way for participants to meet with their plan's planner based on doing a one-on-one conversation via Zoom or some type of online meeting like that. And what we didn't realize is that people would certainly prefer that. And the cool thing about it is that if I was meeting with my advisor, I could bring my spouse onto the call, and all of a sudden you're talking to both decision makers at home. Whereas in the past, the in-work planning, right, that was done in the offices, the spouses were never really involved, and you're typically missing 50% of that decision-making group in the house. So I think technology has really helped bridge that gap. And then certainly some really good wellness apps that are out there for those folks that like to gamify the budgeting or something like the budgeting experience. So supporting participants is really important. So as we come close to wrapping up here and ask for questions from the audience, if you're sitting there and wondering, is it a generalist? Is it a specialist? And kind of, who am I particularly dealing with? It's good to understand that, somebody that's acting as a 321 or 338 advisor are plan fiduciaries, whereas brokers are not. So if somebody says, hey, is my provider a fiduciary? That's a very reasonable question to answer them. It's a yes or no question. If the response is, well, if they start going down that path, there's typically a little bit of a strange arrangement, and they might say, well, I'm technically not, but so-and-so is, and that should make you kind of wonder if it's the right fit for you. How many plans does that person work on personally? I think if it's a traditional financial planner that most of their clients are, a husband and a wife and a family, and they might have less than 10 plans at multiple platforms. Usually that's not the characteristic of somebody who specializes in this business. So you might be missing out on some services. So that's something to ask, how many plans do you work on? And then finally, what is your fee structure? A best practice is to have a flat fee structure without any conflicts of interest, and certainly nothing that is going to be based on any products that are injected into the plan. So if they're paying commissions to a broker, you're typically dealing with a generalist, and you might want to look elsewhere. So Brian and I took some of your time today. I don't think we could have possibly done justice of all of the things you could ever really want to know about a generalist versus a specialist, but we wanted to provide you some information on it. And one question did just pop in: recommendations on how to conduct an RFP. So that's a good question. So an RFP is a request for proposal, and it's a common process that a plan would go through to try to select and ultimately, identify and hire a quality advisor. And there's a process that can be a little complex of running an RFP. So you can hire a professional to do it, or you can try to run it internally. The one advice I would give somebody is, all too often people Google retirement plan RFPs, and oftentimes the services that they're looking for aren't really truly represented within the RFP. So I would encourage those folks to either email Brian and or I. We have an RFP template that we would be happy to give you completely free of cost. You don't even have to engage Sentinel in the RFP if you don't want to, although we would love it. You can go ahead and do that and really send it to the service providers of your choosing. But at least then you're going to get the right questions, the right focus to be able to hire that that fiduciary advisor. I think there was one more question.
Looks like there's one more here. How do I guarantee that my advisor is a fiduciary? And what's the difference between a 321 and a 338 fiduciary? Ryan talks a little bit about the best way to identify or guarantee if your advisor is a fiduciary is really simply by asking the question. Just understanding, who is taking on which roles within the service of your plan, and identifying that, starts really by asking the question. The difference between a 321 and a 338 fiduciary comes down to the relief from liability and the functions that they perform on your plan. Effectively, a 321 fiduciary would be providing you with recommendations that you as an ultimate plan fiduciary would choose to either enact or not. Whereas a 338 fiduciary would take on that management responsibility for decisions within the plan's investment lineup. And your responsibility would simply, as a fiduciary, be to monitor their fiduciary decisions.
Thanks, Bri. I think that concludes the Q&A portion. We really appreciate everyone attending. And at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Kendall.